So this is a short summary of the Knight's Tale. So basically, Duke Theseus is coming back from battle and he's riding through the countryside where he sees these women who are just wailing, gnashing of teeth. Turns out they had been attacked and their husbands had been killed. So Duke Theseus does not take this lying down. He rides off into battle. And basically he wins the day. But as they're going through, they realize that there are two men who are wounded on the battlefield, Palamon and Arcite. So these two guys are basically blood brothers. They have sworn to protect one another, come what may. They're captured, they're put in a tower, and basically they're kind of miserable until they're looking out the window and they see the beautiful Emily walking through the courtyard. Well, of course, then both of them are, oh, I saw her first. Oh, but I loved her first. Oh, I hate you now. I don't care that we're blood brothers and that we've been through everything together. Suddenly we're enemies because we saw a hot girl. So eventually, Arcite is released. He's allowed to go home, and under the condition he never returns. He is unhappy at this because now he can't stare at Emily, who doesn't even know he exists at this point, from the tower. Palamon, on the other hand, is unhappy about this because now he thinks Arcite can raise an army and come back, do war against Theseus, and steal away Emily for himself. So Arcite does actually return. However, he has been so lovesick that he's actually physically altered from it. So he actually returns and pretends to be a servant so that he can get close to Emily. He actually ends up becoming her trusted advisor. Meanwhile, Palamon stages a breakout. And he breaks out, he's going through the woods, and he hears this dude just wandering around talking about how, oh, I love her so much, but I can't tell her that I love her. And he realizes that it's Arcite. And he's like, whoa, no, you did not just come back here. Obviously, the two get into it, and they literally start hacking at each other with their swords because they're going to kill one or the other of them so that the winner can have the honor of Emily's hand. Meanwhile, Duke Theseus comes riding up through the woods, sees the two of them, and is like, what are you doing? And they're like, we're both in love with Emily. We're going to fight to the death. And basically the women are like, oh, that's so adorable. So Theseus is like, okay, hey, we're just going to have a gigantic tournament. So you go get people for each side. And yeah, we will meet back and we'll have jousts and all that jazz. And we'll see who wins her hand. So the day of the tournament arrives and there are 100 knights on each side. And Theseus basically says, instead of doing individual events, there's so many people, we're just going to kind of have a battle royale. And the deal is, if either Arcite or Palamon are taken off the field, having been injured, then they lose and Emily goes to the victor. So beforehand, Palamon goes and he prays to Venus, the goddess of love. And he's like, please, please, please let me win Emily. And she's like, yeah, you're totally going to win her. Don't worry. But Emily is going to the goddess Diana and saying, please, Virgin Goddess, I do not want to do this. And Diana basically tells her, sorry, kid, is what it is. Your fate's already kind of been decided. So you'll at least be happy. And Arcite goes and he prays to Mars, the god of war, and is like, please make me victorious in battle. And Mars shows him the victory. And basically, after that, the gods all get together and Venus is like, dude, Mars, I told you Palamon was already winning this. And Mars is like, haha, too bad for you. And so Poseidon shows up and he's like, don't worry about it. I will make it so that everybody is right. Just stick with me. So tournament happens. Lots of fighting. Ends up that Palamon actually gets injured really bad. And so the referees are pulling him off and he's like, no, 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 I want to fight. But he's way too injured. So when he gets pulled off into the penalty box, Theseus is like, hey, that's it. Palamon has lost. Arcite gets to marry Emily. And Arcite starts riding around on his horse, waving his sword in the air, yelling like, Emily, Emily, look at me. I won. I love you so much. And Poseidon stamps his foot which causes a great earthquake and causes Arcite to flip forward onto his saddle, and it cracks his ribs. So Arcite is dying. So Emily is sitting by his side. He's dying. He says, I want to see Palamon. Palamon comes in and he says, Emily, I cannot marry you because I am dying. But this is my blood brother. This is Palamon. Please marry him instead. And then he dies. So they go into mourning. It's about a year later. And basically Duke Theseus is like, well, Palamon, I know I don't have to ask you twice, but you're going to marry Emily. And then they get married. So this all starts with a young knight who sees a beautiful woman and he decides to rape her. He's taken to court, and this is both the court as in the law and the court as in the royal court of King Arthur. So Arthur is all about, let's chop his head off. But Guinevere is like, let me punish him instead. So the knight thinks like he's going to get off easy, and she's like, oh, no. You're going to die if you can't complete this quest. You must find out what women want and return in 1 year and a day to tell us. So he travels all around and gets a million different answers because no one really seems to know what it is that women actually want. So as he's coming back towards Camelot, he finally sees about 24 women dancing in the woods, and he rides up to ask them, but they all vanish before he gets there. And all that is left is one super ugly old lady. So he's like, you look experienced. Perhaps you could tell me. So she promises yes, that she will tell him, but he must promise to give her what she requests of him in return. Of course, he agrees. They go back to court, and the knight says, women want to have power over men and a final say in all things. And all the women in the court are like, that works for us. And Queen Guinevere gets up and goes to leave. So the old woman is like, my queen, I have asked this knight to fulfill my desire in return for that answer, and I want him to marry me. And the knight freaks. He's like, no, you're old, you're ugly, you're not even high class. But the queen is like, oh no, let's do this. And they're married. So on the wedding night, the knight is super miserable, and his wife is like, how can I make it better? So he goes off on her about how she's old and ugly and poor, and she absolutely can't make it better, and his life is ruined. So she's like, okay, I can make myself beautiful, but I will not be faithful to you. Or I can stay old and ugly and be faithful and never upset you. Choose. And the knight is like, fine, whichever one you want, I'll be happy with. So she becomes beautiful and promises to be faithful and the best wife ever, and they live happily ever after. But the wife of Bath ends her tale with a prayer that women marry husbands who are humble, young, and good in bed, that women should outlive their husbands, and hopefully shorten the lives of men who won't take directions from their wives. She then asks God to send a plague on all those old, abusive, cheapskate husbands out there.